welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about books that I've rated 5 stars and trying to figure out what actually makes me rate books 5 stars. If there are common themes or tropes or writing styles that I am consistently giving books 5 stars. And then also using the information that I find to try to predict what other books on my TBR I might also give 5 stars. I got this idea from Megan and Meg with Books. She did this 5-star audit and I really loved it, and I've been very curious to do it for myself. So we're gonna take a look at my Goodreads and go to my reading stats. So one of the first things that came to my mind of something that I've just always thought I'm very drawn to and give 5 stars to are portal books or books with like magical doorways. Examples of this would be the entire Wayward Children series. All of these books I've given 5 stars, and that's literally what the whole concept of the series is, are these like magical doorways that take you to these fantasy worlds. But then even like in other genres, not just like fantasy, but I love portal horror books. So like The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, that's a portal horror. Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall, that's also like a portal horror book. I feel like it kind of brings me back to like when I was a kid, and I just loved like Narnia and Alice in Wonderland, and like this idea of just stumbling across this like magical doorway that takes you somewhere else. I really, really love those themes when they're done either in like a fun magical way or like a horrific, this is not a place you want to go to kind of way. I just always really love it, and I'm drawn to those stories. So a magical doorway book that I've had on my TBR for forever is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I feel like I didn't even know that this was a magical doorway book for the longest time because I never read the synopsis of this book. I bought this when it came out, when it was like super popular and everyone was reading it. Recently, I read the synopsis and it says, there was a mythic lost city of Weep that got cut off from the rest of the world. The main character like goes through a portal to this world. If I had known that, I would have read it a long time ago. So the next one I think is something that I have talked about all the time that I love, and that is books that are written in second person. But I think when I was really examining the actual books that I have given 5 stars to, I think that it's more so books written as letters, so epistolary stories. Examples of this are The Push by Ashley Audrain, which is written as a letter to the main character's ex-husband. This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno is written as a letter from the main character to his dead wife. A Dowry of Blood, which was my favorite book of last year, is written as a letter to Dracula. One of my all-time favorite books, This Is How You Lose the Time War, is a collection of letters between 2 characters that they're sending back and forth. And I just think I really like something about reading a story that is a letter makes me feel so like immersed in the story, and not like I am just like a reader who picked up a book, but like I feel like I'm reading something very special and intimate. So a book on my TBR that I think has this, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't know 100%, but when I Googled epistolary books, this did come up, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. This has been on my TBR for a really long time for a lot of reasons. This is about a guy who is in this house that is like a dream-like alternate reality, and it's like a labyrinth with all of these different rooms that open up to different things. And yeah, like I said, I don't know 100% if it is epistolary, but it did come up when I Googled that, and I really want to read this. So I think another sort of genre or trope that I do love is dark academia, but I have either rated dark academia books 5 stars or like 1 star, and there's really not that much differentiating them. So for example, some 5-star dark academia books I've read: In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, They Never Learn, and then If We Were Villains. Those are all ones that I loved and I gave 5 stars. And I think what I realized makes those books different from the ones that I don't like is that those are all dark academia books that don't have magic. I feel like there's 2 kinds of dark academia. There's like dark academia that is, you know, real world and more of like thrillers. All 3 of these were thrillers. And then there's dark academia that like blends some sort of like magic into it. Ideally, I think that I like those, but I've never actually read one that I enjoyed. So I think that dark academia books with no magic is something that I am likely to give 5 stars to. The only other dark academia book that I have on my TBR that doesn't have magic in it, to my knowledge, is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I feel like this is kind of the classic dark academia book. I'm definitely intrigued to read this. It has been on my TBR for such a long time, honestly. It is a very long, dense book. Like, this feels like Bible papers. Okay, the next one is cozy fantasy. Now, this is a genre that I have just been slowly becoming obsessed with. Fantasy is like actually my favorite genre. When I look at my all-time favorite books, the majority of them are fantasy. But I feel like what I enjoyed out of fantasy is not what the typical fantasy reader enjoys. So I think I had a very hard time like actually finding fantasy books that I really love. And then I discovered cozy fantasy and I fell in love. So some examples of cozy fantasy are Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I think this is like the poster child of cozy fantasy. Another one, Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher, which is probably gonna be my favorite book of the year. I am obsessed with this book. It's also very cozy fantasy. My favorite book of 2020, The House in the Cerulean Sea. When I read this book specifically, I was thinking this is exactly what I want out of a fantasy book, but I didn't really know what that was. And now that I know cozy fantasy is a thing, I think I'm gonna have a much easier time at finding fantasy books that are what I'm looking for. Just like quieter, smaller scale stories, lighter themes, cozy vibes, not intense, like violent war and politics. I just want cozy. So I have a ton of cozy fantasy books that I've recently put on my TBR, but I think the one that I'm like the most wanting to read is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This one is like Regency England with fae. So it's magic, it's romance, it's Regency England. That just sounds like the coziest, best vibes ever. Quickly jumping in here to talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is Ritual. Ritual is the obsessively researched multivitamin reimagining health from the ground up and takes the guesswork out of vitamins. They contain 9 high-quality nutrients from D3 to omega-3 that are difficult to get enough of every day. They are vegan-friendly, non-GMO, gluten-free, allergen-free, and contain no added sugars. Transparency is also at the core of everything that Ritual does, from the way nutrients are sourced to the environmental impact of materials used to ship thousands of orders. Ritual makes it very convenient to build a lasting habit of taking essential vitamins. I take the Essential for Women's multivitamin. They also offer men's multivitamin, 50+ prenatal, postnatal, kids, and teen vitamins, and recently launched an essential protein range. And right now, Ritual is offering 20% off your first month by going to ritual.com/RileyMarie and using my code RileyMarie, and that will get you 20% off 1 month's supply of vitamins. Thank you to Ritual for sponsoring this video. Another thing that I really love is mixed media. So like The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead has a podcast in it. Love books with a podcast. I feel like I could even just put books with a podcast, but going further, I love books that have mixed media in them, whether it's like documents or letters or emails or podcasts or newspaper articles, anything like that I really love. Again, I feel like this kind of ties into why I like epistolary stories. I just love like the immersion in the world. So The Last Housewife is an example of that. Also, Rules for Vanishing. This has interviews and text messages and emails. It has a lot of different media in it. Also, where is it? What year did I read this book? The Wicker King by Kate Ankrum. This had tons of mixed media. It had like pictures and you would see like little notes that the characters wrote each other, or like playlists, or like the menu from a restaurant that they went to. Again, I just love the like realism and the immersion in the story and the world of getting all these like little extra details. So one on my TBR, I don't know 100% like how much mixed media this book has, but this book does have a podcast. That is The Children on the Hill. This is a horror book that is supposed to have like Frankenstein vibes, and it just sounds really great. The next thing that I love are female serial killers. So like we have They Never Learn. We also have the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey, and then an older one that I read and loved, and I think this is what like set me on my path of loving these books. What year did I read it in? Was it 2020? Oh my god, how long has it been since I read this book? Jane Steele, oh my god, 2018. This is Jane Eyre, but she's a serial killer. You know what? I just love women committing murder. Just love it. So I have 2 books on my TBR that are female serial killers. The first one is In the Garden of Spite, which is a historical fiction book about the first American female serial killer. And then the other one is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing, which is actually about a married couple who I believe are serial killers together, or I don't know if they're rival killers. I feel like it kind of gives me like the vibes from the show You. It says that it's Dexter meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which just sounds like the perfect blurb. One of my all-time favorite series is the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn, and this is a Victorian murder mystery. When I reread specifically this first book, I said that I feel like this is like the perfect book for me. It combines elements of like all of my favorite things into one story, but I do really think that I am drawn to Victorian murder mysteries. Another series that has very similar vibes is the Daughters of Athena Club series. The first book is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. I love this whole trilogy. Another one that I loved, I didn't give it 5 stars, but I've only read the first book in the series, so there is potential for the series to get a 5-star from me. The Business of Blood by Kerrigan Byrne. This is also a Victorian murder mystery with Jack the Ripper. So yeah, Victorian murder mysteries, I think, especially when it's a series, I'm very likely to end up giving those 5 stars. So the Victorian murder mystery book that I have on my TBR is the Lady Sherlock series by Sherry Thomas. This is the first book, A Study in Scarlet Women. So this is like a Sherlock Holmes retelling about Charlotte Holmes, and heard the series compared a lot to specifically the Veronica Speedwell series, which is what made me interested in it. It's also blurbed by Deanna Raybourn, so like I feel like I could really love it. I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words because I feel like there's 3 books that I kind of group together in my mind. Come Closer by Sarah Gran, The Push by Ashley Audrain, and Woman Eating by Claire Coda. I read all of these books this year, and while they're all very, very different books, there is something in my mind that connects them. And I think it's that the way that I would describe all 3 of these books are books where you are very much just in the mind of the main character. They are like intense character study books. You're not getting like world building, you're not really getting much of like other characters and plot. It's really, really just like insulary inside the main character's mind. So I guess like how would I phrase that? Like isolated character study books. I feel like these are ones that like I don't necessarily know if I could just like go to the store and like find these type of books. I feel like they're more ones that like you would just happen upon this type of story, but there's something about really intensely digging into someone's brain that I love. One of my favorite horror tropes is post-apocalyptic. I love post-apocalyptic books. Like I just love watching the world burn. So some ones that I have given 5 stars: Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. That is a post-apocalyptic romance. Station 11. That one's more of like a lit fic post-apocalyptic book. The Girl in Red by Christina Henry. That is a horror book that I loved. The Book of the Unnamed Midwife. That book is so underrated. And then one of my all-time favorites that I always forget is post-apocalyptic. Oh my god, I think we have to go back to 2017, is The Fifth Season. This is a post-apocalyptic fantasy book where this fantasy world has had multiple apocalyptic events. So yeah, I love post-apocalyptic books regardless of what genre it is. I mean, I think I've mentioned literary fiction, fantasy, romance, horror. So I do feel like of like all of the tropes or themes that I've talked about already, this is the one that I'm like the most confident that I consistently love. So I have 2 sort of post-apocalyptic books on my TBR. One of them is the Newsflesh trilogy by Mira Grant, who is Shawnee Maguire. The first book in here is called Feed. This is the entire trilogy, that's why it's so big. I think this right here is the first book. This is a horror series about a zombie apocalypse. Mira Grant wrote my favorite horror book ever, Into the Drowning Deep, so I have been wanting to read this for so long. And then another one that I have that is an apocalypse, but not like a zombie one or like a virus one. That is Moon of the Crusted Snow. So this is about this town that is cut off from power, communication. They're completely cut off from like the outside world. So it's about this community like trying to survive after that, and some visitors from the outside coming into the community. It sounds really great. Okay, this next one is another one that again, I don't know completely how I would phrase this because I feel like I'm just going off of vibes. But the 3 books that I would put into this category are Slewfoot by Brom, The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, and then Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton. Okay, let's talk about what connects these books in my mind. They're all about witches. All of these books, the main character is a witch. These books also all have the devil. Like there's this devil character that is either like luring the main character, helping the main character, and all of these books have some sort of like dark or forbidden forest that the main character is not supposed to go into. So what is that vibe? Because I feel like that's very specific. I could just say like books with witches or like books with the devil, but like that's very specific. It's books with witches where there's a devil who's trying to like corrupt them, and there's also some sort of dark evil forest. Like it is vibes, but it's also very specific. The next one I feel like is a very like basic trope that most people love, but that's found family. A lot of my all-time favorite books have this sort of not just found family, but like very unlikely found family. I do feel like that's a little bit different. Not just, you know, people who sort of like found each other in their circumstance, whatever, but like people who are genuinely so different that in no world, shape, or form would they ever become a team, but somehow they did. Examples of this are Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Honestly, like the Wayward Children series has this as well. You could even say Project Hail Mary, although it's a much smaller team. It's a pair. The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter has this. Oh my god, I read this so long ago. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers also has this. So yeah, I just feel like going even further than just found family, but like characters who are just so wildly different from each other, all of them like so completely different. In no other world would they ever work together, but for whatever reason, they end up coming together and create this like little quirky, weird family. A book that has this sort of unlikely found family that's on my TBR is Light from Uncommon Stars. This one came up on a lot of like found family Goodreads lists, and I've really been wanting to read this. It actually says that it is Good Omens meets The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. It's about a queer alien courtship over fresh-made donuts. I don't know, I feel like this could be really fun. So the next one is something that I've discovered recently that I love, and that is a cute animal companion character. And I think I discovered this because I've been reading tons of T. Kingfisher books, and almost every single one of her books has an animal companion. So like you have Bone Dog and the Demon Chicken from Nettle and Bone. Swordheart, they have, I don't really know what kind of animal he is, but there's a character who's like an otter. I was picturing in my head he's an otter, but I don't 100% know. He's some sort of animal. Lotus, they have a pet raccoon who was the cutest. Pestilence's horse was also like a big part of their story. I loved his horse. Legends and Lattes has Thimble, who's a little mouse baker. So yeah, books with like an animal companion character, whether that animal character is a pet or like an actual like character who can speak. I like either way. And then a book on my TBR that has an animal companion is, okay, hold on, this is a long title. It's Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Olson. I just like randomly found this book. I was looking for like cozy fantasy books, and this came up on Amazon, and it just looks so cute. It's about a woman who inherits a dragon egg, and it hatches, and she has to figure out how to take care of this little baby dragon. Does that not sound like the cutest thing ever? I'm so excited to read this. Okay, the last category, which I also feel like is kind of one that's hard to really like pick up books specifically wanting it to be this, and that is weird lit fic. So examples of this would be Women Eating, The Book of the Most Precious Substance. Bunny, I feel like, is a very clear example of this. Honestly, just like these kind of like lit fic books that you can't really categorize, and they're just weird. For some reason, I'm very drawn to them, and I always give them 5 stars. And I know they're very polarizing, but there's something in me that just really loves it. And then one of the weird lit fic books that immediately came to my mind that's on my TBR that I feel like really fits into this category is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is a literary fiction book about cannibals. It's supposed to be like a satire of food and gender, and I don't know, it just sounds like it's going to fit into that very particular category of books. So those were all of my 5-star books, why I rate them 5 stars, and then hopefully some books on my TBR that will be potential 5 stars. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for any of the tropes or themes that I talked about in this video, because now that I really feel like I have a good foundation of what I consistently love in books, I want to try to seek out more books that have those things in them. Definitely let me know if you wanted me to do this again, but with 1 stars, and figuring out if there's common themes that I consistently give 1 star. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. And once again, don't forget you can go to ritual.com/RileyMarie and use my code RileyMarie to get 20% off your first month of Ritual vitamins.